mentioned it before, but evolution didn't create us to be eternally happy. Imagine that a squirrel would find a big acorn, which oddly enough is the Dutch word for squirrel. He would bite in it and he would be happy and blissful, but if this bliss and happiness would last forever, this would be a really bad evolutionary tactic. He would have a very happy but very short life. In the last video I talked about how 365 days a year is actually very arbitrary, and in this video I'm gonna talk about Yuval Noah Harari's book Homo Deus and how many things around us are actually just parts of our imagination. And talking about rodents being happy, they also did an experiment in the lab where they put a little electrode inside the brain of a rat at his reward center. Every time that the rat looked at a certain corner of the cage, the scientist would push the button and the rat would feel a reward or feel like a dopamine peak. And this would give the rat the impression that it would want to go in this direction, so he went there. It might feel like it's actually his decision, but actually it was just the scientist pushing a button every time it looked into a certain direction. So this can really start to make us question about whether or not we actually have free will. And Yuval Noah Harari goes on and talks about the narrating and the experiencing self. And I've read in an interview that he took a lot of inspiration from doing Vipassana meditation while he was creating this book. And you can really find this back if you look closely. So one of the experiments that he describes, which was done by Daniel Kahneman, in this experiment they took a group of people and they asked them to put their hand in cold water for a minute or for a minute, and then they changed the temperature and it made it a bit warmer, so it lasted longer. So in one setting they experienced just a pain for a short period of time, and the other experience was pain but also the experience getting better. And this is what they call the peak end rule. And afterwards they asked the participants if they would want to redo the first experience or the second experience. And looking back, most people chose the second experience where they had actually pain for a longer period of time, but the difference in experience between the peak of the pain and the end of the pain was what they remembered, because we have a narrating self and an experiencing self. So the narrating self remembers the story about I put my hand in cold water and then it became warmer. So I prefer this experience rather than I put my hand in cold water and it was just painful all the time, even though this was a shorter period of pain. So a very simple example of this is why when you were a child your dentist always gave you a toy at the end, because we only look at the peak and the end emotions. So we create a story in our head and we say, oh look, the end experience, I got a toy, so it was actually not that bad. This is what we remember mostly. So the next chapter is all about narration and the stories that we tell ourselves, not only to ourselves but to each other. And this is how whole cultures came into existence, because if you think about it, brands, he calls for example Peugeot, they are all parts of our imagination, because you cannot really point to the brand, it's just a story that we created. Just like money has value because we all believe in the money, and when we stop believing in the money or when we stop believing in Bitcoin, we're gonna have a big problem, or at least when you've invested in it. Very early on in human history they already discovered that if you give people pain and sacrifice, they will start telling themselves that it was for a good cause. So if you make your child sacrifice for the sake of communism, or your very valuable cow for the sake of a certain religion, you better start believing that this religion or this greater idea was actually true, because otherwise you're just gonna go insane and it was all for nothing. Nowadays in sales they say when people pay, they pay attention, but this has been known for thousands of years in so many different cultures. And the last chapter of the book is all about data and how the algorithms around us are not conscious, but they will start to get to know us better than we do ourselves, and how it has always been a very big advantage to have more knowledge in the past. So if you knew anything more about your enemy or about your environment, you would have a higher chance of survival. But now we've actually come to a place in time where it's more valuable to know what to ignore. So for me, the main takeaways of this book are that it's a really double message. Because by gaining control over everything, we are actually becoming unhappy because there's so much obesity. There are more people being killed by sugar than by gunpowder. I also learned that most of our society is imagined, and if you really want to get a clear view of reality, you should get rid of all these stories. While on the other hand, I also realized the importance of storytelling, because this is basically what's constructing culture. So for more storytelling, I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.